Welcome back, everyone, to infosec.live, where we give you, our audience, the chance to learn from and interact with the people on the front line in the cybersecurity industry. And today I'm joined by Scott Deluke, Senior Solutions Engineer Manager from Abnormal Security, to discuss all things around the hidden dangers of phishing-as-a-service and invoice scams. But before we get into the show, for those that haven't watched before, my name's Simon Lindstead. I'm the founder of the infosec.live community and your host for this show. And by sharing stories and best practices over the last few months, it's led to over 250,000 views of our content here on YouTube by you, our amazing 11,700 and I think 12 subscribers. And a special thank you to our community sponsor, Abnormal Security, for making this educational and informative content possible. If you're watching it live, please do like and subscribe. We want to make these events as interactive as possible, so make sure you drop any questions you may have in the chat. And if you're watching on the replay, we'd love to hear your comments too. So time for me to stop rambling, time for the show. Let's bring Scott on and dig into this. Welcome, Scott.
Hey, Simon, how's it going, man? Happy Monday.
Yeah, happy Monday to you too. We spoke for the first time about 2 minutes ago before we went live, and we realised that we've probably got quite a lot in common. So I'm super excited for this show, Scott. And before I start rambling on and asking you questions, would you just mind telling the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do at Abnormal, please?
Sure, absolutely. Simon, man, I am one of the most fortunate individuals in the absolute world, in my opinion. I have the absolute privilege of being able to support an amazing team of sales engineers that helps protect organizations and people all over the world. And that's a super exciting thing. But I didn't always have this role. When I came over to Abnormal, I was actually a sales engineer, which I loved, because I got to help organizations on that front line and really understand a lot of the challenges that they were going through. And if you back up even a little bit further than that, I actually came from the IT side of the house. So, my journey here has been really fun because I started out defending one organization. And now I get the opportunity to not only help educate, share knowledge, but also support and protect thousands and thousands of organizations, really like pushing beyond of whatever I thought was ever possible in my career. So really excited to be here with you today to talk about a little bit of what I've learned along my journey.
I love that. And just a quick question around that. So out of all the aspects of the job you're doing at the moment, what part do you enjoy the most?
Helping people. That the more knowledge that we share with the world, the more we empower each other to help each other be better. Education is the key to success and will help us fix the challenges before they become absolute unsolvable problems. That's my favorite part of my job.
Love that. Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Scott. I really appreciate it. So the topic today, and I may have generated the headline, so if it's not right, I apologize for that. But the headline is The Hidden Dangers of Phishing as a Service and Invoice Scams. So tell me a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are two of the most egregious things in the world, but there's things that have changed with attackers that make these so challenging. And really the reality of it, Simon, is that we kind of had a massive shift in the way that attackers are coming after our organizations. Invoice fraud, phishing as a service, and everything else is really designed about, let's stop trying to hack into organizations as much and let's try to log in. So this new login kind of social engineering world that we live in has brought on this whole new layer of attacks that include things like business email compromise, phishing as a service as vehicles to get those across the line, as well as, unfortunately, vendor fraud that has cost somewhere around $26 billion since 2016. So again, large losses, but massive gains, unfortunately, for the bad guys and some of these newer techniques.
And how much has AI influence the ability to provide these sort of outsourced services? I mean, I've noticed, and I had Mick Leach on the show, who's your field CISO last week. Wonderful guy. We were talking about the complexity and more the new accuracy of grammatical content within the messages you're getting. So I even got the old Nigerian prince message has been improved. There's a new version of that I got a couple of weeks ago, which, to be honest, was pretty well written. But the really scary ones for me that I've had the last 2 or 3 weeks, and it's probably because of the lead up to Christmas, is the delivery companies. So about rerouting your parcel. I've had one from HMRC, which is our tax office here in the UK, which, apart from the email address at the top of the communication, was exquisitely done. It would be very, very difficult to tell the difference. And after forwarding that to a couple of accountants I know, they found it very difficult as well. So how much has AI influenced that? And I suppose what's coming next?
No, that's a really, really good place to start and also work backwards, because I think that the reality is, Simon, that, we all try to report as much as we know as quickly as we figure it out, to be able to get that out to the community. Reality is, it's just like the news. When something comes out, we're probably 3, 6, 5, 7 weeks, maybe months behind. So from what I'm seeing, AI is playing the absolute role in attack vectors today, meaning that we've taken all those manual tasks, very much like our SaaS, kind of vendors that are helping secure our environments. They're using those same technologies, the same ChatGPT engines, the same different LLMs to go ahead and integrate, learn, and then formulate those very, very specific attacks. And I like that you brought that up. I actually almost got bit the other day with a smishing attack. It was very, very fascinating because I can read those all day long. I'll engage with attackers because I think it's fun. And I also learn. A lot of people will actually talk to you. Please don't. I don't recommend that to your everyday normal person. I am a professional. No, I'm just kidding. But again, the attack actually was like, hey, man, I'm excited to see you for dinner tomorrow. I was going to a dinner, Simon. That's never happened to me before. And I'm like, oh, hey, cool. I'll see you there. Didn't have your number saved, but awesome. And then they said, hey, my name's Alicia. Do you remember me, Jennifer? I'm like, there you go. You failed again. I guess my point is,
you're only Jennifer on the weekends, right, Scott?
That's right. But here's the thing. Most likely in that engagement, they went out and found out that I was going to be at that dinner because I'd actually posted it on LinkedIn. So there's very, very high profile or high probability that they rip that information off my LinkedIn, use that tack to formulate directly against me with zero touch from a human. That's how much I personally believe in what we're seeing in the massive, massive increase in attacks as what is the role that AI is playing today. It's everything.
That's really scary. Talk to me about that increase in attacks then. How big is it and when did it start?
Yeah, absolutely. Just a short little history lesson, because a lot of people don't understand kind of where we came from and where all this, something exploded is that, back in 94, I think it was, I was working as an IT guy, and there was a tool that came out, I think it was called AO Hell. And the whole point of the tool set was designed around installing something on your account and then stealing AOL passwords. It was kind of the first reported phishing kind of incident ever. And then I don't know if you recall, do you remember the love bug?
I do. I am old enough to remember that. Yeah.
Let's go. I was hoping. You don't look older than 27, but I was taking a risk there.
Yeah, you can come back.
Yeah. But the love bug was kind of the other thing that we were seeing at that time, meaning that people were still hacking in. They were installing something on your computer and they were ripping all of your contacts. It's absolutely changed now to where they don't do that. They want to take as much information as they can, extrapolate it together, and then come after things specifically. The thing that's really interesting to me is that this started with something we talked about back in 2020 called fish kits. Right? Fish kits were all the talk. The reality of what a FAS really, really is, some smart people, just like industries and SaaS solutions and people that you trust, have gotten together and said, hey, you're really good at this. This is a really cool tool. This is also a cool tool. What if we use this developer over there, wrap them all into a box, and made it so my niece could do it? That's what we're facing today. These tool sets are easy. They're log in and pay. They're subscription based. And some are even free, Simon, showing even the evolution of when a space gets really, really busy, their business models are evolving to have different ways to not only make cash.
They've even got freemiums coming in already. My goodness
Freemium's
me.
already in. Yeah, absolutely. There is one called Sniper DZ that is very, very scary because basically they ask nothing. It's very, very easy to find. They'll either host an infrastructure for you or give you all of the tool sets that you need. All they ask is an API plugin, going back to leveraging APIs, to be able to siphon any positive stealings of credentials that you get. And it's a really smart model, Simon, because think about it. As
Wow.
security engineers or security companies, let's say you start saturating the market with one type of security product. What happens? Prices drop, or you see a whole bunch of people buying each other, right? We're kind of seeing the same thing here. We have so many FASs out there. I mean, they're uncountable. I would say I've seen the names of around probably 400 or 500 of them. People are thinking of a new business model. So think about this. I don't want to sell my FAS anymore. I'm not going to charge you a monthly service because I'm tired of dealing with the monies there. But if you give me all of your stolen credentials, I'm going to resell them to another FAS provider. Because one thing that you need, no matter how much information you have, is the vehicle to send the attack. And that is that business able compromise. So that's what those things are doing. They're basically selling a secondary service using a third-party service. It's fascinating.
So, what interests me now from a business person's point of view, so you've got the FAS that you can go out and buy. If you're a criminal who wasn't an online criminal before, but I suppose a traditional like family of criminals or group of criminals, what happens next then? So you've exfiltrated that data. Is there somewhere they can then go to then make the most out of that, again, without having too much technical knowledge? I'm trying to get to the point of an end-to-end process, I suppose, for a not tech-savvy person. Or is there a point in this chain where you do need someone who knows what they're doing?
So I like that question. So I think there's always going to be a little bit of technical acumen that is required. But I would say we went from needing 40 to 50 people sitting in a room working together to collaborate to do very, very technical things down to maybe two. I've been in the industry on both sides. I could do it myself, meaning that it could take one person to send out millions of attacks a year and still do everything on the background just by myself using some of these services. And why I say that is because, you know what? Their UI developers are awesome. I've downloaded several of these FASs myself, and they look fantastic. In fact, better than a lot of the security tool front ends that we have today. Yeah, and they'll pop up with going across, hey, buy our basic service. But if you really want to be hot, we're going to teach you how to steal cookies. They have tutorial videos that you can sign up for extra, 24/7 support where they'll log in and help you set up your own environments. I've actually built this lab myself for around $850 in Bitcoin, and it was fascinating. I was able to look at a 1,600 person company in a matter of about 18 minutes and learn everything I need to know about them across social media using about 16 fish kits, but it all put
automated
together and said, here's target number one. Click here to send the message. Here's target number two. Click here to send a little bit different message. Hey, this person engaged. We're automatically going to send a message over to this other person that we know that they have a very heavy relationship with.
Do you know what this sounds like? So I use, I'm giving away my secrets here. So for the events that I host, I use Dripify to put together sequences for outreach. And what that does is it then connects with my LinkedIn. I can then target a certain demographic and it will then reach out to them with a series of messages that make it look as human as possible. Effectively, it's the same, isn't it? But for more nefarious purpose. You're not getting a free ticket to a dinner here, my friend. You're getting your bank account rinsed and your pants pulled down, right?
Exactly. And the interesting part about it, and going back to what you mentioned about AI, you can use AI to formulate across multiple mediums to better understand who your person you're trying to go after. I sure hope nobody does this to me, but think about my background right now. I almost thought about shading it out, but the technology wasn't doing that great. Yeah. But however, how much do you know about me? You know quite a bit. And you could use that to formulate a very, very realistic phishing attack against me without ever typing a word. I could take
And
this
it's
picture.
just it's automated social engineering, isn't it? I mean, it takes me
That's
back
it.
to my first or my second or third sales job when I was I'd have been 19, 20, was for Everest, the home improvement, the double glazing company. And I remember my sales manager saying to me what to do when you went in on these appointments. He said, as soon as you get in their front room, in their sitting room, look around to see what's on the walls. Are there sports trophies? Is there this? Is there that? Then find that common ground and then build the rapport with them there. I mean, it's like Glengarry Glen Ross sales tactics packaged up into some kind of platform as a service. It's just like a dystopian hell, is what it sounds like to me.
It kind of is. And, you're right. We've been socially engineering each other as humans since the beginning of time. Caveman
Yeah.
throws half a deer out front. Next thing you do, you take their home away. It's kind of the same methodology. And, that's one thing I wanted to make sure that we touched on a little bit. The attacker in game has not changed. It's the
No.
methodologies they use that is changing. And some of those methodologies are what makes FAS so scary, kind of stepping back into why the evolution is so important to think about is before it was sending just an email with a fake hosted website,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of deterministic factors. Today, it's taking over legitimate sources. It's sending them over actual legitimate sources. It's using great companies like Cloudflare to secure that production line to ensure that it breaks things like URLs or skips sandboxing. Just all the amazing techniques that we've built to make our areas more secure, they're actually making their attacker lines way more secure. So it's fascinating.
It is fascinating. Okay, so we've talked about the problem. It's only going to get worse. It's clearly going to get more complex, harder to spot. What can organizations and individuals do to combat it? I mean, that's the question, isn't it?
Well, we're doing the first part right now. You and I are doing you and I and many other organizations, both inside the security world and also I see companies doing it all the time, is sharing that knowledge. Right. The number one thing that we can do is educate and empower ourselves. That's going to be step number one. Going beyond that, it's we have to understand what verticals we are in and how we're specifically being attacked. You can reach out to vendors such as Abnormal or other vendors who are on that front line, and they will happily share some knowledge that some of their other customers are doing. For example, Simon, one of the biggest things that happens with a compromised vendor is going to be vendor fraud. Helping
Yeah.
organizations understand how to build a very mature line of communication, but even understanding the basics. For instance, if you get something that sounds a little bit off to you, or even if it doesn't sound off to you, why not do that extra validation step? I know I love my job. It's the only one I have. I don't want to give away 27 or 27 million or $27,000 or 2,700, if you will. So don't look at the email that you just got. Don't look at the text message and take that number and call it. Don't use any URLs on there. Don't use those domains because it might be a typo squat. Use your brain, slow down, use your EQ, constantly update your organization's records around what are the official contact names, what are the official contact numbers, maybe managers that go a little bit above, especially when, I see, unfortunately, lower level APAR people send out $2 to $17 million invoices all day long. So again, I think
Yeah.
it's working together with your teams and your vendors to help build appropriate things that we see working. And then also, finally, I have to throw in that shameless plug is using
Of
tool
course.
sets that will help you see things that unfortunately are obviously obfuscated from the human eye. And you know what? I've been doing email for 25 years. My first job, I was doing Lotus Notes.
Me
And
too.
I see facts every day that I would have to spend hours upon hours going through to really figure out where things went sideways. And without using AI to fight AI, we're going to be in big trouble.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's a couple of things there. One of them slipped my mind, so I'd have to come back to that. But the other one was around, you said about education and awareness, and we assume that organizations who deal with these massive financial transactions are aware of what's going on. Personal story, I'm dealing with an overseas purchase at the moment, and all of the communications all been through WhatsApp. It's been very laid back. Um, and then you get through the communication on WhatsApp asking you to make the payment. And I said to the person, I said, can you also email me the same information as well and send it to this SMS number on my phone? So I've got it. And they were like, why would we do that? And I said, because there's a massive issue going on with real estate transactions. I know in the UK and the US at the moment where people are intercepting those. It's the easiest thing to do, isn't it? It's the easiest thing to do. You're waiting for the email. You're excited for the email because you're buying a property. It's nothing you want to do more than make that final payment. Someone intercepts that communication, sends you different bank details. So again, it's verifying. I think Jonathan Van Houten, Dr. Jonathan Van Houten, sorry, Jonathan, said there, verify and validate. I think that's very, very true. And the other point I was going to make, and I don't expect you to jump on the Simon bad-mouthing awareness programs bandwagon, but for me, a lot of the awareness programs that are out there are too tick-boxy and not really engaging the people who you're trying to educate and engage. So they're my thoughts. And I just wanted to get yours around that as well.
Simon, I'm really glad you brought up education, especially, kind of inside education that we use. There's some amazing platforms out there that teach really, really interesting things. However, they're not targeted enough anymore, meaning that, in the days of old, we could teach the janitor and a CEO the same thing, and they're actually leveling up. At this point, we need to be more specific about the types of attacks and types of things we might see going to those specific industries. You also we talked about this earlier, and you kind of touched on it there for a second, is that I think there's been so much focus on the upper enterprise that we're kind of missing where, unfortunately, it's game over. And that is in the lower, smaller organizations, because they're the biggest targets these days. It's that mom and pop shop who has that, oh my gosh, this deal that I'm going to do, it's a $250,000 deal. It's going to change my life. When they lose $250,000 because they cannot afford the education and the tool sets, they're done. Everything in their world is wiped out. If somebody I'm just going to throw them out there, and it's not a knock against them, but Microsoft loses $250K, it's going to be okay. It's not going to feel it, right? So more of the ways that we as an industry can not only help and support those who have extra cash laying around or can afford the tool sets, but also we have probably a majority of organizations that we really need to be helping that sit on that, commercial line, that SMB line, and they're really our true supply chain that's going to bring us into tomorrow. Because I promise you, Jimmy's steel shop that makes steel that maybe Tesla buys, when they go out of business, they're done. Tesla's not going to care.
No, they're not. But then again, you look at the supply chain issues around dealing with smaller companies. And the other thing that's happening there, I think, is that bigger organizations, with all the risks for supply chain at the moment, they're just not engaging with these smaller companies. So these smaller companies, by not adopting some form of security approach within the organization, they're also missing out on bigger ticket contracts. And the aviation industry is one excellent example of that here in the UK. I know recently there's been some new legislation through which has pushed out a lot of those smaller businesses. And we were indeed talking about it before we went live. And my words were, I think, around the fact that the majority of vendors have priced themselves at enterprise firms. And of course they have, right? Because that's where the money is. I get that. But I do feel, as a former SMB regulated business owner, I do feel like they've all been left out in the cold a little bit. Everyone in the industry gets that, though. So surely, as you've said, irrespective of what the bigger vendors are doing and what everyone else is doing, us as individuals, us as professionals in the industry, it's our job then to make sure that we're out there educating these people, isn't it? It's just we've got to find a way for our employers to pay us to do that, right?
100%. It goes back to kind of like how people can protect themselves. The larger organizations, you should also work with your supply chains because you do care about what they do. Make sure they have those mature processes to kind of compensate for some of those security controls they can't quite afford. I know that another thing is we kind of drove ourselves into this, Simon. The world's changed. We're not castle and moat living in, data centers and running on 12-year-old hardware anymore. We're a SaaS world. And unfortunately, in in a SaaS world, there is a cost to serve. And like you said, like everybody wants to be a business that is sustainable and continues to make money. But I know that a lot of the partners that we work with, we drive our costs as far down as we can for those lower markets to say, we want to help. And we know you have the same challenge, just like somebody who has 100,000 users out there. And this is the best that we can do. The more that we can do is going to be, like I said, educate, hop on and do different shows like this, show up to some of these vendors, work with some of these individuals, and just continue to make the world a smarter place. And that in turn will make it a safer place.
Absolutely. And just to reiterate what you've said there, Scott, I was talking to, I won't name them because they're sensitive, obviously, a fairly big financial organization in the UK who actually already uses your services. And the CISO I was chatting to a few weeks ago, when I told him about the fact Abnormal was supporting the community, he said, "Oh, it's amazing." He said, "We were really short on budget. We desperately needed what they had, and they bent over backwards to help us get the tooling that we needed." So I've heard that from other people other than employees from Abnormal. So at that point, I suppose I should just bring up this little QR code. If you're brave enough to scan it, if you're working in cyber, you might not be. I did put it together. It's okay. You can chase me down if not. That will take you through to their landing page, just to give you a little bit more information about them. There is also a link in the description to Abnormal if you don't want to scan that QR code. I see a couple of you have. It's coming up on the screen, so thank you. There we go. It does work. Do find out a little bit more about them. And Scott, is it okay if I drop your LinkedIn profile link in the chat as well?
100%. Always happy to help.
Thank you. And I just see we've got a comment from Dr. Van Houten. So let's see, put there. SaaS world equals still in data centers, but someone else's, more often than not in a shared infrastructure model. That's a great point. Let's just touch on that for a moment, Scott.
Absolutely. So you're absolutely correct. And Jonathan, that's also a real testament of where that vendor sits in their space. That the shared infrastructure is something that, with these newer techniques that we're starting to use, using identity, behavior, contextual understanding, are a little bit more sensitive than they used to be in the past. So what we're seeing, for us specifically, and I know vendors in our space who are using different stuff, CrowdStrike, et cetera, they're going to be doing a little bit more compartmentalization. And that is a really good key that I think you brought up there, Jonathan, is that, that is a very, very important part of being like smart about who you do business with. You have to vet out your vendors. You have to understand how they're hosted. You have to understand what's going on with your data, and you have to understand how it potentially is being shared across their platform. If they can't answer those questions, run away. But you are right. It is just another data center hosted out at another place. The challenge is somebody charges you to play. So no different than we charge them to play. They charge us to play.
Absolutely. Okay, curveball at the end. So you've been in the industry a long time. Not saying you're old, Scott, just because you told me what your background is before, and I know how old you are. I've only been in the industry for coming up 4 years in a few months, and I've been to RSA conference 3 times now, 3 years in a row. I've been very privileged to go. I say privileged because I got to meet a ton of really interesting people, got to host some really interesting events, but the whole vendor floor now, this is probably longer than a 2-minute conversation. 3,000, I don't know how many thousands or hundreds of firms there were on there. In reality, they probably did 10 things between them. The stage we're at in cybersecurity industry then, are we still in our infancy? Are we moving towards being teenagers? And are we going to see massive amounts of consolidation moving forward? Or is that just me with my financial services hat on, wondering how this can be sustainable?
I think that we're cyclical. If you go back to like 2007, 2008, we kind of had what I call the great integration, right? You had your Cisco's and everybody else kind of buy everything. Yeah. And you went from, back then it was 1,000 vendors down to maybe, I don't know, a couple hundred. I think we're going through that again. We're going through kind of this great consolidation of being able to do that. And hopefully, in some regards, for some organizations, especially when we're talking about the lower enterprise, hopefully that will lower that cost to serve. But I do want to comment on one thing. Yes, it's very hard to choose who your vendors are, but this is more like to the vendor community as well. We have to cooperate. We're all trying to solve challenges together. It doesn't matter if I see somebody who I am, competing for business for, they're doing some cool stuff. And I want to learn about that. I want to learn from them. I want to learn about their methodologies because you know what? Maybe there is an organization who can't do business with an abnormal security, but maybe I get educated enough to know of another company that they can do business with. So it's all about community cooperation, not only from the IT side to their vendors, but also vendor to vendor. It's so important. And going back to your question, we're absolutely in our infancy because you know what? We're still making some of the same challenges and same mistakes that we have for the last decade. We just got to continue to get better, 1% better every day. In 1 year, that's 365% better. Then maybe I'd say we've grown up into children.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think from an end user point of view as well, they would much more appreciate vendors working together and sharing knowledge and sharing best practice than the kind of siloed approach that we've had in the past. And I always relate this industry to financial services. It's because all I ever knew. But the model we worked under was an independent financial planners, basically. So we used every company out there in the marketplace. And I can see that evolving a little bit with the kind of MSSP model and the reseller model and the CDWs and people like that. But I still think there's room for improvement for a really holistic approach. And the thing that we went through in financial services, which I don't know if it will ever happen here, is the banning of commission.
Yep.
And that was the greatest leveler because then we all became transparent with our fees. And then all of a sudden we all worked together. So maybe something like that could also then, the trickle down effect from that would be to then lower the prices for those SMBs that we were talking about earlier. But I'm excited and privileged to be in the industry. I'm really glad I chose this industry to finish off my career and be surrounded by genuine people like yourself who actually want to go and help people. Because believe you me, in financial services, that isn't the case at all. Everyone's out to try and, get the most they can out of it for themselves.
Hey, Simon, I live 5 miles away from all the billion-dollar headquarters for financial services here in South Lake. Yeah. So, yeah.
Of course, you know exactly how it is. So, look, Scott, thank you so much for taking the time to come on. Audience, again, thank you for your interaction. Thank you for your questions. If you haven't joined the community, if you're watching this, please do come along. It's free. We've got over 7,000 people in there now, all sharing knowledge and best practice. And it wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for our current community sponsor, Abnormal Security. So, Scott, to you and Abnormal, thank you so much for taking the time to come on. Any final last words of wisdom for our audience before I wrap things up and have fish and chips for tea?
Don't give up, Simon. Don't give up. You're going to run into trials and tribulations, but what you're doing right now, I just wish we could take you and multiply it by 1,000, because that is going to continue pushing down this path of us being better as an organization, us being better as a, holistic community. And again, just bringing back being able to be human every day at work, as opposed to being afraid of losing our jobs just because somebody's coming after something that it wasn't even ours. Our companies.
100%. Scott, thank you so much. Thank you for coming. We have to catch up at some point after this for a proper chat.
Looking forward
not in front of the whole world. But everyone, thank you for tuning in. Scott, awesome. See you all soon. Back next week. Thank you.